Okay. I can't see my comments. Ooh, that's the only downside, isn't it? Okay. Just kind of getting set up, folks. So if anybody is already here, welcome. Just let me know if you're here when you arrive. If anyone does arrive, sound is on. Little things moving. This is good. Video is on. Haha. I am here. Drinking water and getting myself ready. Hello! Right, we have one person. Lovely. So we're starting at 3 o'clock, but I just came on early because I didn't want to make that same mistake and have no sound for the first couple of minutes, So I just wanted to make sure everything was right and fun. So thank you for joining already, and we'll just kind of sit and just enjoy me getting myself ready for a storytelling session, moving about, stretching, cracking my awful back at the moment. Oh, right. Everything looks good. We have water. We have controls. Hello, Liam. Hello. Oh, my goodness. 2 people. How exciting and lovely. Thank you for joining, folks. We'll be starting in about 5 minutes, just kind of getting in early to, as I say, make sure that everything is working. I presume everyone can hear me okay. Sound is working today. We're not having that same embarrassing moment that we had the other day. I see things moving on my what's it called again? Sound desk. Yeah, you can tell this is going to be great. I can't even remember words at the moment. But yeah, if you can just give me a wee thumbs up, guys, if you can hear me, let's make sure everything is working. I can see me on my screen. Can hear. Thank you, Liam. You obviously didn't listen. I said thumbs up. Honestly. Thank you, Liam. I appreciate it. So we will just wait. So whenever anyone new joins, if you just let me know you're here, just say hello. It just gives me an idea who's here. Also, age group is also handy, just so I make sure that I don't maybe deviate onto something that might not be suitable for certain age groups. I know, with you, Liam, you like to keep it nice, sweet and cuddly, so I'll try my best. You've heard my stories, it doesn't go that way sometimes. Lovely. Oh, it's kind of weird doing these because I thought I would be able to see everyone that joined, but unless they leave a comment, apparently I can't see who's part of this, unless I'm missing a huge feature of this live chat thing. I don't know. Ah, well, we'll get there. So a few more minutes, folks. We'll get kicked off. As I say, I came on early just to make sure everything was working. I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend. Can you call it a weekend? Because, I sometimes get up every morning and I am literally going, what day is it? I have no idea sometimes. I had to ask, I think it was Friday, I discovered it was Friday. And I was kind of really confused because I didn't know. Hey, Scott, how you doing? Thanks for joining. I just had no idea what day it was. And I don't know, is anyone else in that boat? That they're literally just kind of like, you get up and you're kind of like, well, what am I going to do today? Because I'm not allowed to leave the house. It's fun and interesting times, folks. So 3 minutes and we'll kick off properly. Just kind of giving everyone, Catherine, hey, at last, you made a live show. Thank you. Thanks for joining, by the way, guys. I know this was kind of last minute organizing, but I just, I kind of, it's been a wee bit of a strange journey for those that know me and maybe follow me on Facebook. You might know myself and my wife got into a car accident a couple of weeks ago. Somebody very thoughtfully rear-ended us and actually spun us 180 degrees with the impact. So much so that, you know what, we drive a Nissan Xterra. I'll rephrase that. We did drive a Nissan Xterra, which has been kind of classed to a modern day tank. It's a pretty sturdy beastie. It's gone. She is going to the great sky heaven, car heaven in the sky, should I say, because she is no more. And I got a bit of whiplash and a bit bashed up. So I'm kind of, I'm using these to keep my brain going as well and get myself back into the habit. And also because I realized that if I, hey, Joyce, is there, is that Joyce? Yes, Joyce as well. It looks like he's joined us. Scott and Joyce, lovely people that do some of the markets and that amazing stuff. Love them. They endured me for a whole Calgary medieval fair. It was wonderful. But yeah, so I realized very quickly that I kind of would go insane if I couldn't perform. And then it also made me realize that if I wasn't performing, what would happen the next time I actually went live on stage? And a part of me actually is already in that stage. You know, my next live gig could be August or it could not be. I'm still waiting to see. And I'm just thinking, like, actually being put in front of an audience is going to be really weird after doing these kind of microphone, no face sort of events. So this is going to be really weird. But I take it everyone who's joined so far can hear me. I'm sounding okay, not too croaky, not too clicky. You're hopefully not hearing all those lovely cracks and cricks in my back at the moment. And we'll be kicking off very shortly. This is just me. For those that have kind of come, just joined, I was making sure that I got my sound right. I made a terrible mistake for one of my live shows. Oh, I touched my face. Oh, don't do that now. For one of my other shows that I did, or just kind of live stories, I hadn't turned on my microphone. So for about 2 minutes, I was literally talking. I was doing a whole mime act. Oh no, Lorna, I'm not getting any Iron Brew. This is the bad thing. For those that don't know, Iron Brew can cure any ailment. And I believe Scotland has basically kept it all to themselves so that they survive what is going on. No, Lorna, that's the problem. And not knowing if the fringes are going to happen in August, I don't know if I'll get my supply. Lorna is actually my Iron Brew dealer. I have this lovely family in Edmonton. They are literally like my other Canadian family now, because of oh, my head's gone. I mean, I know I'm remembering Connor. Lorna, what's your husband's name? It's just totally gone out of my head. I can picture him and everything. But basically, they come to all my shows because they're wonderful people, and I always get a stash of Iron Brew brought, which is really nice. So, folks, that is 3:00. Enough of me rambling, which will never not happen because it literally is me. So I have a few people online. If anyone else is just listening, just pop down a hello so I know you're here, mainly just so I kind of get a feel for who's here, age group as well. As I mentioned, I've got a set list. Don't fall over, people. I wrote a set list down to make sure I had some stories and didn't forget them. But Doug, yes, Douglas, yes, thank you, Lorna. So basically, this is going to be just a storytelling session, chatting. If you've got any comments, anything, put them down. I'll keep trying to remember to glance. And basically, I just thought I would come on and tell you some stories to hopefully entertain you during this horrendously strange period of isolation and being shut off. So as I say, anybody that's online, listening, watching, say hello in the comments for me just so I know you're here. What I decided to do for this is I actually kind of went back to my early days of storytelling. Some of these stories, some of you will have heard. I tell a few of these every so often, but I've tried to look for ones I know I haven't told for about a year, maybe even 2 years. And one of them I'm pretty sure I haven't even told in Canada. So I kind of went back there, and that came off of the live feed I did last night when I was trying to get over my nerves. Yeah, I had nerves. I know, it's crazy. But I was trying to get over my nerves to actually go and do another live feed, which is a thing called the Social Distance Festival. If you haven't seen it or went onto it yet, go on. It's a wonderful thing. Basically, lots of performers from around the world, all going on, doing about a 15-minute set, and you have the option to tip them if you want. You know, just help them out. They're doing their thing, trying to survive like everyone else. And of course, it's the same with this show. If you guys enjoy it and you want to give a little tip, there's some links there. If not, don't worry, because basically I'm doing this for myself as well, and as well to kind of give something back and entertain the community while we're all kind of isolated and stuck at home. So I thought about the stories I was going to tell, and the first one I want to tell you is one I haven't told. I'm pretty confident for about 2 years. And it's a wonderful wee Scottish tale, like most of the ones that I tell. And it's called The Piper and the Boots. Maybe Lorna, she might recognize this one because they have come to a lot of my Fringe shows. So there's a very good chance I did this in the earlier Fringe show that I did, the Brave and Free one. But you just, I can't remember half the stuff I do. I just tell stories and have fun. But this is a traditional wee traveller tale, so to speak. You see, in Scotland, we have the travelling community, or what we call the tinkers. But that doesn't just, limit it to what we know as the tinsmiths, the people that would go from door to door, mending things and selling things. The travelling community also was storytellers and musicians. And pipers. The bagpipe players were well sought after. I mean, their life was travelling from town to town, village to village, playing at weddings, birthday parties, funerals. They would make their living, and more often than not, they'd get a wee bit of coin. They would usually get a bed for the night and some food, and of course, a wee dram or two. So it was a nice, comfortable life, and they would just travel playing the pipes. Now, one of the more famous pipers, he was travelling around and he was having the time of his life. He'd actually just finished a wee wedding the night before, and he rose early in the morning and realised, you know what? I'm done here. I may as well head off and see if there's more work in the next wee town. So he gets himself ready and he heads off. And he walks down the lane enjoying the day. And it's one of those rare Scottish days. The sun is shining. There's hardly a cloud in the sky. The birds and the beasties are singing. And it's one of those bonny, bonny days. And he's walking. And he's whistling away to himself, and he's thinking about the work that he might get in the next village, and where he's going and what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. It's always about the travelling. And as he's walking, that typical Scottish thing happens. The weather changes. First of all, just gets a wee bit cloudy above his head, but soon enough there's a wee wind picking up. And it gets a bit heavier and heavier, enough to give him a wee bit of a breeze under his kilt. And as he's walking, it gets greyer and darker. The wind gets stronger. And soon enough, the rain starts to fall. But in no time at all, that rain gets heavier and heavier and gets colder. Soon enough, it's starting to pelt him because it's turned to hail. He's getting thumped with the hail, and then it changes. It starts to snow. And it snows and snows, and it gets heavier and heavier and heavier until he's starting to wade through the snow. It's getting higher in his feet. It's getting up to his shins, over his knees, and he is ploughing through this snow, and this piper is miserable. He's cold, he's wet, he's freezing, chittering in his teeth. And what makes it worse is, well, you see, when you're a travelling performer, there's certain necessities you have. Sometimes it's food and it's bed. Sometimes it's going out for a wee dram with your friends, or maintaining the equipment. And this piper, he liked to make sure his pipes were in good condition. And that didn't often leave any money left for himself. And in this occasion, it was his footwear. His shoes were a disaster. In fact, there was more cardboard than leather. Now, he'd been shoving bits of paper and cardboard in them to keep them together. And of course, with all this rain and cold, they were just dissolving around his feet. And he was miserable. On he trudges and trudges and trudges, and all of a sudden, he trips and falls flat into the snow. Well, he bets himself up and shakes himself off and looks around, and he's fair confused because he knows he's still on the path. He can see the trees either side. So what is he going to do? What's happened here? What's he tripped over? So he looks around and he sees where he fell, and he thinks, well, I've got to figure out what that was. So he brushes away some snow. And what he uncovers is just a wee tip of something black. So he brushes away more and digs in, and all of a sudden he realises he's uncovered a foot. It's like a boot in the snow. So he brushes off more, and sure enough, there's a boot there, and he thinks, this is brilliant. This is just my luck here. I found a boot. Maybe there's a second one. So he brushes away, and sure enough, there's a second boot in the snow. And he thinks to himself, that's brilliant. Now my feet will be warm and dry. So he goes to tug at the boot, and he realises something's not quite right. So he brushes a wee bit more snow off, and he realises that the boots aren't as yet unoccupied. So as he brushes away the snow, he uncovers a set of legs, a set of knees, a set of thighs, waist, brushing up. There's a chest, 2 arms, and a head. And he finds out that some poor unfortunate soul has frozen to death in this snowstorm. Oh, what is he going to do? Well, you know what? He'll head on, he'll find somebody and tell him about this poor man. He better get on, or he will end up like this man himself. Well, he starts to walk away, and as he's walking away, he can't help but just looking at those boots, and he's thinking, well, my feet are freezing and soaking, and well, he doesn't need them anymore. I mean, who's going to mind me taking them? He's not going to mind it. So he goes over and he thinks, I can't, I can't. And eventually he realises his needs are more. So he starts to tug away at those boots, and you know what? They are frozen stiff to that man's body. And the piper thinks, well, there's my answer. That's it. I'll head on before I end up freezing as well. So as he's about to walk away, something heavy hits his hip that's in his vest pocket. And he pulls out his old trusty knife. And he thinks to himself, well, I could get the boots off now, couldn't I? And he looks at these set of boots, and he thinks, they're awfully fine boots. They would be great. But if I cut the boots, then they're going to be useless anyway. So you know what? No, I'm just going to, let's go, let's head. And he starts to take those steps, and then the thought comes to him. It's an awful shame to waste those boots, and I really need those boots. And the thought dawns on him that there is one way to get a hold of those boots. And he decides he needs them. So he goes down to that frozen body, and he opens up that blade, and he starts to slice and cut and saw and cut and snap. And now he has one boot with a frozen leg in it, and he sets it aside. And then he goes to the second leg, and he starts to slice and cut and slice and saw and snap. And now he has 2 boots with 2 perfectly frozen legs in. But of course, he knows he can't do anything with the boots just now. So he slings them over his back, and he starts wading through the snow, desperate to find somewhere for shelter. And luck is on his side. He sees a wee light in the distance. It must be one of the local farms. And he thinks, salvation, and makes his way to it. Well, in no time at all, he's frozen and soaked, but he reaches the door of that farm, and he knocks on it. And what opens that door? Well, it's a rather unexpected sight. It's one of those wee sewer-faced wifeys that you often see in Scotland. You know, the type of ones that would curdle milk. And she basically stares out at him, and she's like, go away, we didn't want strangers here. And of course, the piper's like, but I'm freezing, I just need somewhere to stay. And the wifey's like, no, my husband doesn't like strangers, you're no welcome here. Well, the piper's really put out by this, because Scottish hospitality is a strange thing. It's a bit like Canadian hospitality. You usually welcome a stranger in need into your house. So this was really unusual. And basically, the piper is desperate, and he's saying, please, he's begging. And then he looks, and he sees an old barn. And he says, look, I can even sleep in the barn. I don't care if there's animals in it. I just need out of this snow. And after a wee bit of thinking, the wifey kind of goes, all right, you know what? You can sleep in the barn, but you need to be out of here before the sun rises so my husband doesn't know you're here, and you stay away from that big black bull. Well, the piper's so grateful that he doesn't say anything. He doesn't even want to challenge her and say he's no that type of fella, with relations to the bull. But he agrees to stay in the barn, and he heads over there and he opens the door and he steps in, and it's heavenly. With all the beasts that are in there, it's warm, there's fresh hay, he makes himself a bed, and he looks over at that big black bull and he thinks to himself, oh no, I wouldn't want to go near that anyway. And he settles himself down for the night, and then he remembers those boots. And he sees all the steam rising off the beasties, and he thinks to himself, well, if I just push those boots up against one of their bodies, they'll no notice, and maybe by the morning I'll be able to get those boots on. So that's what he does. And he goes and has a sleep, and he sleeps a fairly nice wee rest that night, and he wakes up as the sun's rising, remembering what the farmer's wife said. And he thinks, oh, my boots. And he goes over and he feels it, and that leather. Oh, it's so soft and subtle. And it's just like, oh. But there is a problem, because there's still 2 legs in those boots. So he has to very carefully pull out those legs and sit them aside. And he whips off his shoes as soon as he can, and he pulls on those boots, and they are heavenly. The most comfortable things he has ever worn. Well, he is so happy. He dances a wee jig, he stretches, and he thinks, I'll be walking for years in these boots. And he gets his gear together, and he's about to leave, when he starts to think about that farmer's wife and the farmer, and how rude they were. Wouldn't even let him sleep in the house, wouldn't even give him anything to eat. Here he is, frozen, soaking, and they've made him sleep with the beasts in the barn. And he thinks to himself, I fancy playing some mischief on them. And he looks about the barn and he sees that huge black bull and its big food tray in front of it. And he thinks, that'll do. So he grabs those 2 severed legs and he sticks them in to his old shoes and gently goes over to the food trough and places the 2 shoes and legs in it, side by side, as if he was standing. And he chuckles to himself, this'll be good. And he sees up high and he climbs into the hayloft and he waits. And he waits. And sure enough, in comes the farmer's wife, and she looks around. The piper's gone and she's fair chuffed. Good, she won't get any grief from her husband. This is great. And she goes to start milking the cows and setting everything up. And as she sits down to start milking one of the cows, she happens just to glance over at the big black bull. And then something peculiar is in its food trough. And as she goes over to see, her heart sinks. She starts to quiver and tremble. She starts to sweat, and then a huge scream leaves her mouth, followed by, the bull's eaten the piper! The bull's eaten the piper! And of course, all this ruckus and racket brings the husband in. What is it, woman? What's going on? And now she has to explain about the piper sleeping in the barn that night. She has to explain that now the black bull has eaten the piper. And now both are panicked. The husband's thinking, oh no, they'll think we did this. They'll think we did it for his money and his pipes. Oh, we need to get rid of the evidence. So what they do is they grab a sack. They put those legs in a sack. They take a shovel and they head out to the back field. They dig through the snow and dig into the earth, and they place those legs in the soil and cover it up, put the snow back and look to see if anyone had spotted them. And then, feeling that they got away with the whole thing, they start to head back to the farmhouse. Now, the piper's been watching this all along, and he is absolutely splitting his sides laughing at this. He thinks this is the greatest jest he's ever had. But there's one more trick he knows he can play. So he decides he can't miss this opportunity. As they're walking back to the farmhouse, he sneaks out the barn. He goes to that same mound where they'd buried those legs. He pulls out his pipes and starts to blow. And of course, we all know the awful din that they make. That terrible, like, cat being strangled sort of noise. And all of a sudden, he starts to blow and make noise and play a tune. The snow is gently falling, and the farmer and his wife freeze. They turn slowly round, and what they see through the snow is the ghostly image of the piper playing a mournful tune. His spirit clearly come back for vengeance. And they scream, and they run. They run across that field. They run by the farmhouse. They run down the lane and disappear over the horizon. And the piper, he's beside himself. He can't stop laughing. But as he's laughing and chuckling away, he realises, I maybe went a wee bit far there. Maybe just a wee bit too far with that one. I'll go and sit in the farmhouse and wait on them and explain it was just a wee jest. So that's what he does. He heads into the farmhouse and he sits down and waits. But he can't help noticing that there's breakfast cooking on the stove and he's fair hungry. So he thinks, well, it's a shame to let that go to waste, isn't it? So he sits and he has breakfast and he makes himself a cup of tea and he waits. And the clock ticks by and lunch comes. He thinks, well, I mean, they're no back yet. I'll have myself a wee piece and jam or something just to fill my belly. So he makes himself some lunch and he waits. And the clock keeps ticking. And it's supper time. And he thinks, well, I mean, I can't just sit here and starve. So he makes himself a wee bit of supper, pours himself a wee dram, and he enjoys a feast and sits by the fire and he waits. And he waits all night. He waits all the next day. He waits all the next day and the next day. And as far as I'm concerned, ladies and gentlemen, as far as I know, that piper is still living in that wee farm, waiting for the farmer and his wife to come back to tell them that he had just played a wee practical joke. Now, he's enjoying it, I will admit, because he now knows that whenever he travels, he's always got a wee place to go back to while he waits on them. But he's starting to get a wee inkling to this day that he may never ever see them again. And a farmer's life isn't as hard as he thought it would be. Thank you. Oh, the piper in the boots. Okay, who have we got? Let's just see. We've got Scott Joyce. Oh, yeah, people know each other. I like that. I like it. Liza's joined us. Lovely. Excellent. Anyone else there who's watching and hasn't said hello? Good. We'll just see if anyone pops up. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining, guys. So I'm basically going to tell a few stories this time. Normally I just do one and disappear. Don't feel embarrassed if you need to slip in and out or disappear on me. I totally get it, because everyone's busy. But I thought I would do maybe an hour or whatever, basically until I run out of steam, whatever. You can tell words aren't working. I'm a guy who makes a living out of words, and I'm terrible with them. Absolutely terrible. So the next story I thought I would tell is actually one of my earliest tales. Last night I spoke about a bit of stage fright, getting nervous again, and I spoke about my early days of storytelling, and I spoke about an encounter I had when I first tried to do the Cafe Voices in Edinburgh, and I had prepared 2 stories, and basically I'd prepared them from this book by a gentleman called Bob Pegg, and as I got to the storytelling cafe to tell a story, I discovered he was the host that night. And of course, I was like, how can I tell this man's stories back to him? But you know what? Bob's just a gentleman. So he was more than happy for me to tell one of his stories. Because as a storyteller, we kind of like hearing our own stuff, because that means it's traveling and it's continuing and it doesn't die. And the worst thing for a story to do is to die, because no one's been telling it. So the next story I'd like to tell is one that I know I haven't told in how long I've been in Canada, folks? 4 years. 4. So I honestly don't think I've told this in Canada. I might have told it in my podcast. I think I told it in my podcast, but that doesn't necessarily count, because the secret of a podcast is that you actually can record multiple times, nobody knows. Well, this live stuff, this is where it gets fun. Hey, John. My good friend John. Lovely to see you. Well, see your face anyway. Yes, John is a wonderful fringe performer that I know. We're hoping eventually we'll collaborate when the world, probably when the apocalypse ends, when no one's left, we'll collaborate because that's how life goes. Anyway, the next story I want to tell you, folks, is one called The Golden Bowl. Just so you know, I am warm. This is not a fever. I am in a 6x7 room, which is fully packed. So effectively, this place becomes a sauna when I don't open the door. But if I open that door, we will have a cat and a dog in here in a second, and there will be no peace at all. So I'm going to endure a little bit of temperature rise, and my God, I can feel it already. Okay, so the next story I'm going to tell you is called The Golden Bowl. It has been a long time since I've told this bowl, and this is this story. And this is a story that actually originates... traditionally, the history behind it is almost Pictish in Scotland. Certainly, this version kind of relates back to the kind of Pictish times or references Pictish people. The story has variations, of course. But if you don't know much about the Picts, the painted ones, the Picti, they were a very strange interesting race within the Scottish. They basically lived above the Firth of Forth. Anything beyond that at a certain period in time was known as the Picts land, the Picti land. It was the kingdom of the Picts. And they are depicted in many movies in a very bad way. The truth is we don't 100% know about them to a degree. There's lots of stone carvings. There's lots of stuff. We have the Romans' writings. I believe it was Tacitus wrote about these strange, wily, weird, kind of painted creatures. And the old joke, of course, is... sorry, someone's just messaged me there. I'm like, Josh, don't message me at the moment. The interesting kind of... his joke about the Picts is kind of like this. So the Romans, as we know, they traveled all over the place, and they basically invaded, they dominated, they crushed some of the most terrifying tribes in Europe. They came all the way through Europe. They came up through England because, the English, and sorry, Lorna. And they basically got themselves all the way up through England, and then they came to the borders of Scotland. A wild, mysterious, damp country. Moist, for those that don't like that word. They came to the borders of Scotland and they looked at this wooded, hilly, wet country. And the Romans kind of went, oh, I didn't fancy the look of this. Oh, no. Well, they were wearing sandals. So, you know what it's like when you're walking through wet, wearing sandals. It's never pleasant. But they look into this wet country. And then it happens. As they're staring, they see these weird, wily creatures coming out. They're painted blue head to toe. They've got wild ginger hair, and they're as naked as the day they were born. And the Picts stared at the Romans. The Romans stared at the Picts. The Picts waggled all three weapons at the Romans. And the Romans looked at them, looked at each other, looked at the Picts, looked at each other, and then kind of unanimously went, you know what, we've done enough, we're going home. So the Romans never really came into Scotland. They didn't really get a foothold. Yes, there are settlements. We know they are. We gave them a little bit of foothold just to make them, we didn't want to emasculate them too much, But basically, they didn't get as strong a foothold. But the Picts are this mysterious race that we only have various references to, and I love them because there's some wonderful stories. But there is actually a very famous Pictish king that's referenced a lot, and his name was Brudai, or Brood. I always just say Brood, but I believe it's proper. One variation is Brudai. And he was a young chieftain at one point, but he basically rose to being the king of the Picts through the use of something the Scots have pretty much used since, the dawn of time, and every famous Scottish hero like Wallace and the Bruce used afterwards. Guerrilla warfare. You see, the Scots have never been strong armies, but were vicious, dirty fighters. I mean, never get in a fight with a Scotsman. Like, you're never having children again if you get in a fight with a Scotsman. We might lose, but we're getting in the cheap shot. That's all I'm saying. But basically, the Picts did this, and Brudai mastered this technique. And what he was doing is oh my goodness, it was the Northumbrian kings at the time, if I remember. Don't quote me on that. I might have that slightly wrong. And they were coming in to invade. And there was a point, there's been many points in Scottish history we may not have existed. We were close to extinction back in the Pictish time, where all the races had basically been taken over, all the way up to kind of what you guys know as Edinburgh along, had been wiped out, and it was under Northumbria. So, I mean, effectively, if that had happened, it would have been English to this day. But what happened is they went in and they started following the Picts and trying to wipe them out. And what Brude did is he kind of drew them out, and he attacked and disappeared and attacked and disappeared. And he forced the armies to kind of get drawn out and spread out to the point that the armies were miles away from the supply chain. And of course, if an army can't eat, it's already beaten. So what Brudai did is he basically just wiped them out slowly but surely, and he saved Scotland and then basically started to push back and take the country back. That's kind of one of the variants of the story of him. He was amazing. Like the accounts of this guy, his epic tales of battle and blood were just phenomenal. But this story is not about that, Brudai. This story is about King Brude as an old man. This is a story about him when he's given up wielding a sword and he's now ruling over his people. And he decides to move to a very famous spot that still exists today, but it was an old Pictish fort, Urquhart Castle, just off Loch Ness. You can visit it today. It's a beautiful castle, but it has got old Pictish settlements there. And that used to be an old kind of Pictish fort at one point. And that's where Brude retired to. He took his men, he took his beautiful young wife. He'd married a rather bonny, red-haired lassie, and she was considerably younger than him. And they'd moved up to this old fort, and basically this was where he was going to retire. And that's where this story starts, with the old Brude in his fort, loving life. And he did love life. I mean, he loved his wife, he loved these people, but there was actually something he loved more, and that was hunting. And he would go out hunting every day with his bow and arrow, and he would take his faithful hound, Bran. Now, again, if you're familiar with any mythology and folktales, Bran is a very famous name of a dog under the Finn McCool sagas. He's one of Finn McCool's dogs. And what's really interesting about Brude, he actually met Calum Seal, Saint Columbus, who had travelled over to convert all the tribes, of Scotland. And basically Columbus had told him the tales of this great hero, Finn McCool, and all these epic stories. So, of course, in honour, he basically named his hunting dog Bran. And this dog of Brude's, Bran, was a powerful dog. It would hunt with him. It could take down a stag by itself. It could fight wolves. It was a powerful, powerful beastie. And just on a little note, Calum Seal was known as the Dove of the North. My name, Calum, is actually a variant of Calum. So in Gaelic, my name means dove. There you go. You now have some ammo, folks. I'm giving that one away for free. Calum means dove. Yeah. Doesn't really balance in my mind. But anyway, let's get on with this story. So here is old Brude in his fort, living his life, happy, going out hunting, passionate about hunting with his dog. This was his love. He was happy. But he loved these people, and his people loved him. And what they would actually do over the years is they would make pilgrimages to the fort to bring him gifts, to lay wealth at his feet because they loved him so much. And Brude loved this, but it started to get overwhelming. So eventually what he did is he asked his men to collect the items at the gates. And he had a huge big barn, a purpose-built barn put into the fort. And every day he made it a point of going out to that barn, walking up and down the aisles and admiring all the items, pictures of him, vases with his image, statues, gold, wealth. It was all just given to him, jewelry, everything. And he would always make a point of admiring it and acknowledging the fact that people had made the effort to give it to him. But one day, as he's walking down those aisles, he notices something. And it's so simple that it catches his eye. And it's a wee wooden box. And he looks at this wee wooden box and he picks it up, and it's the craftsmanship is beautiful. I mean, this thing is perfectly made. In fact, you can't even see where it opens, but as he touches it in the middle, it just gently clicks open. It's so perfect. And as he raises that lid, inside, nestled, perfectly fitting, is a simple golden bowl. And Brood, he picks up that bowl and he looks at it, and it is stunning. The craftsmanship, everything, the carving, it's beautiful. But as he looks round the rim of the bowl in the old Ogham script, he reads these words: "Give this bowl to the one you love the most." Well, Brood doesn't need to think twice on that. He slips the bowl in his cloak and he heads out of the barn. He crosses the courtyard towards the great roundhouse, into it, and down the corridors, down to a room where he knocks on a door. In her room, the young queen is brushing her hair and making herself look glamorous and beautiful. Sometimes she wonders for who, but she knows. She needs to keep this up and make herself look splendid, when all of a sudden she's interrupted by a knock on the door. "Enter," she calls, and in shambles the old king, and she looks at him as he holds something out to her. "Darling, I've brought you a gift." "Oh, sit it down on the dresser. I'll have a look at it later." And the king does, and with that, he's dismissed. Well, the queen continues to make herself up, and then as she's about to leave her room, she catches the bowl out of the corner of her eye. And she goes and picks it up and looks at it. Ugh, the silly old fool. But as she looks at it, she too reads that script. "Give this bowl to the one you love the most." Well, she doesn't need to think. She grabs her cloak, she puts up the hood, she slips the bowl into it, and out of her room she goes. Making sure she's not spotted, she slips out the back of the house and across the courtyard, heading towards the soldiers' quarters. Slipping in, she heads to a door, knocks, and slips in to the handsome young captain's room. She goes up to him. She embraces him. "Darling, I've brought you a gift." She gives him a kiss, and then she says, "I'll visit you later," and slips out the room, leaving the captain a little bit dazed, but staring at the gift that she had given. And as he looks at this beautiful bowl, and he marvels at it, and he recognizes it as a bowl. He's a practical military man, but he reads the inscription. "Give this bowl to the one you love the most." Well, that's obvious. He goes to the side room where his teenage son is still sleeping. Now, for those that have teenagers, you know the predicament. The sun may be high in the heavens, but this kid was fighting. Every ounce of his body fighting to stay under his covers, and the father knew it, so he placed the bowl on the side table and went about his duties. And it was a few hours later that the young lad stretches and strains and decides to stop fighting the inevitable, and he gets up and he sits on the edge of his bed, and there he sees the bowl. A gift from my dad. Oh, wow. He's looking at it, and, it's a bowl. We're talking about a different time. This is like an Xbox probably to him. And he's looking at it and he's finding it amazing. It's so beautiful. And then he reads it, that script. Give this bowl to the one you love the most. And he sits and he thinks, and then it comes to him and he pulls on his breeches and his tunic and he runs out of the halls. He runs out of the quarters. He's down the corridor. He is basically across the courtyard. He's barreling towards the kitchens. When all of a sudden the young serving girl comes out the kitchen and they collide. And there is the young soldier's son looking at this wonderful little serving lassie, and he holds out the bowl nervously to her, and she reaches out and she takes it. And before she can even realise what it is or thank him, poof, he's gone. And a blaze of blazing red face and hair, he's gone. Well, the young serving lassie's looking at this, but she's got her chores to do. So she slips it into her pinny and she heads back and she mops and she brushes and she cuts and peels and cleans everything until she's told she can take a break. And she heads out into the courtyard and she sits on one of the benches in the sun, resting her weary feet, and then she remembers the bowl and she pulls it out. And she is amazed. Look at the beauty of this. This is the most amazing bowl ever. And then she looks at it and, well, she sees some strange markings round the rim. But she has never been taught to read, so she has no idea what it means. But just at that moment, one of the old priests in his dark robes comes round the corner. And they are scary looking things. They're all covered in big heavy robes and scowling faces, but the girl really wants to know what this is. So she leaps out in front of him, holding the bowl out, and hands it to him. And the priest looks at it, impressed, marvelling at it. And he looks at the young serving girl and says, this is a very beautiful thing. And do you know what this says? And of course she shakes her head shyly, and the priest explains that these words say, give this bowl to the one you love the most. He hands the bowl back, and then he heads on his way. And the young serving girl stands there for a moment, and then she realises who she wants to give this to. She heads across the courtyard to the large round house. The guards are sleeping in the afternoon sun, so it's easy for her to slip through. She heads down the corridors weaving until she comes to a door and she knocks. In that room, the old King Brood is pacing the flagstones. He's not sure what he wants to do that day. In the corner, his faithful hound Bran is whining away, when all of a sudden there's a knock at the door. And as he answers it, he looks down at the young serving girl, a girl who years before had come to the village as a slave, and he had freed her from that. And then he looks at what she's doing, and he sees that she's holding something up to him. And he takes it, thanks her, but again, she's a shy one and she's gone. She's given the person that she loves this item. And old Brood smiles to himself until he looks down and he sees a so familiar bowl, a bowl that he recognises, a bowl that he held in his hand not but an hour before. And as he glances at it and checks, a sadness fills his heart. And he reads those words, give this bowl to the one you love the most. And then a wee smile tweaks the side of his mouth as he realises what he should have done all along. He walks over to the dresser and takes a jug of water and fills the bowl. He walks over to the corner and places it on the ground. Bran, on hearing the chink of the metal on the stone, rises himself up, walks to the bowl and starts to drink his fill. And all of a sudden, the old king knows what to do for the rest of the day. He grabs his cloak, grabs his bow and his arrows, looks at his old faithful dog and says, "Let's go hunting, boy. Let's go hunting." Thank you. There's nothing like a faithful dog, folks. Yeah. Um, I've got to be careful how I tell that story and what I say about that story now, because I do have a loving wife. So it's absolutely, that story changed for me since I actually met someone who was lovely. Who we got? Matthew. I think something big about the history of Edward I, which includes the conquest of. Oh, yeah, we don't talk about him. Yeah, Matthew, we try and avoid him. Yeah, Longshanks. He was not a nice guy. There's Leanna. Hello. Leslie, hello. Catherine, still here, clapping. Lovely. Thank you, folks. So what I'll do is I'll finish off with one last story, because we're kind of hitting an hour mark here. I had loads of stories I could tell, but I don't want to absorb too much of your time. So I'm going to go, you know what? I'm looking at this and I'm thinking we've probably not got too many young viewers. So I'm going to go with a gruesome one. Somebody mentioned Edward the First. This is a kind of weird connection. So Scotland has been a country that it's been fighting off. Gosh, how do I say this nicely? But I can't really. The English, they're just, some of them are lovely. There's one or two listening who are adorable. I love them. They're very special people to me. But the English basically haven't done us any favours. And I'm not even going to say it's English people. It's usually the Crown or the Parliament. So I will be fair. And of course, Longshanks was a bit of a swine. The fact that he hung Drawn and quartered Wallace, the fact that he fought against the Bruce, and we eventually beat his son. So yay to the Scots. And basically the Battle of Bannockburn gave us our independence. And it freed us and made sure that Scotland was free. Until 1707, when dastardly deeds were done and basically the Act of Union was signed. And there is a lot of evidence to suggest that it was bribed into being. The people of Scotland didn't want it. A lot of people didn't want it, but there was a few people that profited off it. And basically it happened. And one of the most famous quotes that I love is by our national bard, the fabulous Mr. Robert Burns, Rabbie Burns. He was never really called Rabbie. Robert Burns, when he made that beautiful quote as such a parcel of rogues in a nation. He hated it. He actually had a grandfather or great-grandfather, I think it was his grandfather, fought in Preston Pans with the Jacobite rebellions. Jacobites, if you're unfamiliar, go watch Outlander. It's a reasonable, decent education for the Jacobites, apart from the fact that Jamie is a falsehood. No Scotsman is that handsome. That's actually a lie. He is Scottish as well. I can't even say that. He's such a lovely guy. I actually got to meet him round a kitchen table in Edinburgh with a storyteller who had taught him, sadly, dearly departed now. Not Jamie, the guy that plays Jamie and the storyteller. He was a lovely, wonderful man. But that's a story for another time. But yes, basically, he's too nice. And Outlander's an interesting one for me as well. Before I get into the story, see, this is what happens. I start one story and I basically meander around the world, and then I might come back to it or I might not. I'm not as good as Billy Connolly at keeping the story flow going. I am more of an erratic chaos monkey whose basic head will explode in different ways. But yeah, Outlander, one of the things I always say about that is it's actually very accurate and it's reasonable, not the time traveling nonsense, but they've tried to portray the Scottish side of it fairly accurate. They've done a very good job. I know a lot of the guys on the Outlander set as extras in all the battle scenes. It's a wonderful group called Combat International. I was a part of the combat team, not actually on Outlander. I could never basically get there because of my schedule, but I could have been on Outlander as an extra, looking devilishly handsome as always. And I always say that I did go to basically audition for Outlander, for a very important role in Outlander, and it was between me and somebody else. And frankly, I'm still disgusted that they took Graham McTavish over me. I mean, look, between the two handsome, balding, bearded men, I think I stand out much better than McTavish. Okay, it's an immortal fight. He doesn't even know this fight's going on. This is a personal thing. But anyway, let's get back to the story. Somewhere in my head there are stories. But yeah, so basically, Robert Burns hated all this. He was indoctrined with Jacobite stories. Basically, the Jacobites were constantly trying to fight against the Union and take Scotland back. But there's a very famous Edinburgh story, and it revolves around, if you've ever been to Edinburgh and you head down to Holyrood Palace, you will see the hideous building that is the Scottish Parliament building, built by a Spaniard. Nothing against Spaniards, but I just think there were some beautiful and amazingly talented Scottish architects who didn't need to use bamboo and things that would need replaced at an incredible expense every couple of years. Anyway, the Scottish Parliament is there, and next to it is a wee house which is part of it, and it's called Queensberry House. Now, Queensberry House plays a great part in Scottish history because Lord Queensberry is rumoured to be one of the swines that was bribed gladly to sell his country. And the reason that we believe this and pretty much know it is because nobody liked him. He was a horrible man. I mean, this is a guy that basically was bad to his tenants and bad to people around the city. He had an armed guard to protect him at all times. Lord Queensberry was just a vile character by all accounts. And when he signed over his country, nobody liked him even more. But it's said on the night that he signed away his country, and he was given his gold, it was either 17,000 or 30,000-ish, which obviously in today's standards is a heck of a lot of money. But he was given this purse of coin and he was great. So he decides him and his lackeys are going to go out and have a wee party. They're going to go out and celebrate. But he looks at his staff and he says, I will return. And I want a feast for my friends laid out on our return. We'll be back in a few hours. And with that, he's gone. Now, when the cat's away, the mice will play. And all his staff know it doesn't take that long to prepare the meal because it's been cooking all day anyway. They also know when he will return. So now they know they can go out, have a wee drink and get back and he will be none the wiser. So that's what they do. They all head out into the night to have a wee drink, knowing they can get back to the house, and they leave the house empty. Or that's what you would be left to believe. Because there was somebody left in that house. And that was the young laddie who was far too young to go drinking. And his job was particularly important because he was what was known as the spit roast boy. His job was to turn the handle, which turned the great piece of meat above the fire to stop it from burning. And he would sit in a wee dookit in the fireplace and literally turn the spit all the time just to make sure it didn't burn. And he was left in the house to this job. And I did say he was the last person left in the house. And that would again be a slight lie because history will tell us he was the last person because Lord Queensberry wanted history to believe that. But you see, Lord Queensberry had a very dark secret. His son. You see, Lord Queensberry had a son that when he was born, he was slightly deformed. And apparently the mother died in childbirth, and Queensberry was distraught, but more so at what this hideous creature would do to his reputation. So he actually had his son locked away and hidden from society. And over the years, this laddie grew, and by all accounts grew into a giant of a man, a monstrous creature, but sadly, with very little in its head. It was very stunted in its mental growth. And Lord Queensberry, as this, and I'll say creature, forgive me folks, grew, he had it actually chained in a room in the basement under armed guard. Now, on this particular night, all the guards, on hearing that the staff were going out drinking, thought, well, all is fine. And they went with them, leaving the house empty, but for the spit roast boy and Lord Queensberry's son chained in the basement. At some point, the smell of the meat must have wafted through the house. The smell must have filled the son's head, nostrils, and mouth. For he started to strain and wrench at his chains until his great strength, he snapped his bondings. He broke through his door and started to stalk through the house towards that sumptuous smell. The staff returned from their cavortings. They had no idea that the son had escaped. They started to head towards the kitchen, all merry, convinced they'd got away with their mischief. When they walked into the kitchen and one started to scream, and then the cries filled the house of, "It's got out. It's got out." Not he's got out. It. They viewed this child, this man thing, as a beast. And they were terrified at his bulk and mass, and there he stood, turning the spit, wrenching great gouts of meat and munching them down with the juices pouring down his face. And they stood there terrified watching this creature until their eyes were drawn down to the floor. And they couldn't work out what they were seeing, because what they saw lying on the kitchen floor was the meat that they had left cooking on the fire. There it was, smashed on the floor. So what was... And that's when they really paid attention to the meat that Queensberry's son was munching on. And then the screams and terror filled the house, for as they saw, turning on the spit, being wrenched apart and eaten by Queensberry's son, was none other than the little spit boy himself. The Cannibal of the Canonsgate is a very, very famous story, but it's also one of the stories that Queensberry tried to hide from the world because it doubled up on his despicable nature. He sold off his country, he chained his son in his basement, and this was the result: a cannibal devouring a small child. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's a perfect story to leave you today. I mean, it's coming on, I'm looking at the time here. Oh, you know what? It's not even an hour, is it? I'm looking at when I came on, and forget that I came on early because of my, just to make sure sound was working. So actually, if you are happy, I can tell you one more story, because I thought that was going to be a great story to leave you to go and get your supper on, but I can actually up the game if you really want. Just let me know in the comments if you fancy one more story, or if yous are all done, I will happily leave it there, folks, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, because you know me, I can talk and talk and talk a lot more. Anyone that knows me, it's hard to shut me up. Oh, hey, Aileen from Edinburgh. I was about to say London. Wow. Yep. Excellent. I'm just Chelsea. Oh, hello. There's a few faces I haven't spoken to in a while. Carly. Oh, lovely. Yeah. Yep. Matthew. Ronnie. Yep. Good. Okay. One more before dinner. Okay, guys. Thank you. That's a lovely vote of confidence. So this is one that probably some of you will have heard. I know I haven't told this for at least a year and a half or something. I actually checked with Krista before I came on live. I was like, have I told this story recently? And this is the one that she was like, I think you told it maybe a year or a year and a half ago. But it is one of my first ever stories that I loved. Going back to the tale about Bob Pegg, this was the story that I told that night, and I've always enjoyed it. It's on my Scottish bedtime stories CD, the gruesome one. So is The Cannibal of the Canongate. But this is the one about Thrym the Giant. And the reason I love this is in Scotland, there's a wonderful Irish storyteller called Audrey Parks. And Audrey's blind, and she would come to events. And for some reason, she would always come to mind. She was a great supporter, but she would always come up to me, and she was just this tiny little lady. She was so beautiful, so wonderful. And she would always come up, and she was very softly spoken until she was telling a story. And she'd always say, "Are you going to tell that one about the giant?" And I hadn't planned on it, but I would always tell it just for her. Because she just is. I hope she's still around. This is the problem of being away from Scotland for 4 odd years. You kind of lose touch with people. So for those that have heard this story, this is the Highland origin myth, or the one that I just call Thrym. And it's one of my favourite stories because I just get to be loud and bullshit and have fun with it. So, here we go. To finish off, a delightful tale, a pleasant little ditty. Let me take some water. I'm still finding these Facebook Live things weird because I'm so used to seeing people's faces. Technically, the people that are listening, I couldn't fit them in my studio. So that is one bonus. And God, you wouldn't want to be in here. This place is going to get funky soon with the temperature levels that are building up in here. That's the only downside to building an airtight studio to recording in. It gets warm. Okay. Norway was full of giants. I should check. Did you know this? Because if you don't, let me explain a few things, because I need to backtrack. You see, right, you might have heard of the Norse gods, Thor, Loki, Odin, Tyr, yeah? And you'll have heard of the giants that they fought, the frost giants, the mountain giants, etc. Yeah? Okay. Have you heard of a wee thing called Ragnarok? The end of days. Oh, there's some aptness there happening. Ragnarok, the end of days. Well, this was all part of Norse mythology. And basically the idea was the gods and the giants fought and it ended everything. Well, I bet you didn't know that happened. The truth of the matter is Ragnarok happened and everything ended. And as is true in the Norse mythology, in an ending, there is always a beginning. Because after their world ended, our world was created. This beautiful, magnificent world. And there it was. Now, the problem with Ragnarok is this, though. If you've ever read any of the Norse mythologies, the gods aren't exactly... what's the word I'm looking for? The best gods in the world, and the giants aren't exactly the cleverest creatures on the planet. And this is where things went wrong. You see, when the battle was sounding and all the horns were blaring, there was quite a few giants that actually had no idea what was happening. They're in their beds trying to slam off their alarm clocks, wondering what is going on. So when the world ended, they found themselves in limbo with nowhere to go. But when our world began, they looked at it and went, "Oh, that's a no bad place." And they saw Norway and said, "That'll do." So Norway became full of giants. Now, this sounds fine. And then life goes on, and all of a sudden man comes in. The human race comes into being. And now we have giants and the human race side by side. And I'm going to tell you something. Jack and the Beanstalk didn't do giants any good. That was very bad press. You see, by all accounts, our records tell us that a lot of giants and humans got on. They were great together. They had parties, they sang, they had great feasts, they cohabited perfectly, they had nights out, but there was no hanky-panky. At the end of the night, they would go their separate ways. I need to point that out. And life was good. Life was perfect in the world. But that probably makes a really boring story, doesn't it? If life was perfect, if everything was good. So let me introduce the antagonist of this tale. And his name is Thrym. And Thrym is one of those giants that hates everything. He hates men, women, and giants. He despises everything. He's a miserable, evil swine living up in his mountainous lair, glowering down at everything. And the only thing that Thrym really likes is eating. And his favourite thing to eat is us. He would march down from his mountainous lair, roaring and bellowing, I'm going to find you. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. And he would grab unsuspecting people. He would bite off their heads. He would spit them away. He would suck out all their slimy innards. And then, leaving nothing but a flappy skin, he would throw it away. And this is what he did every day, marching about. I'm going to find you. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. Crunch, spit, throwing it away. So the whole area around his mountainous lair was just flappy skin suits. Well, this wasn't going to stand. You know, the giants in Norway and all the people were getting a wee bit fed up of Thrym. They wanted to get rid of him, but the problem is they knew they couldn't kill him. He was too strong. So they decided to form a council and exile him from Norway. And you know what? Thrym didn't care. He thought about this and said, I'll be done with you. I've had enough of Norway. I'll happily leave. And he marches off out of Norway, roaring and bellowing, I'm going to find you. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. Because he knew out in that world was a smorgasbord of delights to be sampled. So he marches away. And soon he comes to the ocean. Now, back in those days, the oceans were a lot shallower, and for a monstrous giant like Thrym, he wades into them up to his knees. Wading through the water, looking around him, roaring and bellowing, I'm going to find you. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. Eventually, he sees land. And after a day of wading, Thrym steps foot on the Shetland Isles. Has anyone ever been to the Shetlands? Because I'm just going to let you know now, don't bother. Miserable place. Miserable. All it is farms and wind. And those ponies. Those vicious, man-eating ponies. They're terrifying. Shetland ponies, honestly. I've got a friend in Edinburgh who has actually been chased by them. He still has nightmares. Being chased by Shetland ponies. They're vicious. In fact, the thing is, there is actually a reason for the Shetland ponies. You see, as a wee side story here for you, just to give you an understanding, you see, when the Shetlands first existed and the farmers were there, they had terrible times. They were basically getting blown about everywhere. All their crops and livestock and everything was getting blown about the place. And of course, their horses were getting blown about. So they realised they had to stop this, because without their horses, they couldn't travel or do the work. So one farmer came up with a genius idea one day, and he told all his friends to do it. He realised a way to stop the ponies, the horses getting blown away, was this. Dig 4 holes into the earth. Put your horse into the earth up to its knees, and then pack the earth round it. And that way, when the wind blows, the horses won't get blown away. It's bloody genius. Well, that night, all the farmers did this. They stuck their horses into the earth, 4 holes, stuck their legs in, packed it up. And then basically they all went to their beds. And that night, a fair big storm came in, and it howled and it blew. And the farmers slept comfortably, knowing that everything would be fine. Oh, but can you believe their eyes, their faces, the sheer shock when they walked out the next day and discovered their horses were gone. But when they looked into those 4 holes, what they saw was the lower part of their horses' legs. And from that day on, every horse in the Shetlands was of a diminutive size and had a rather vicious temperament. And they say that is how the Shetland ponies came to be. That is why they don't like people, and they have been called man-eaters. They're vicious. They will devour a fully grown man in seconds. Vicious. Anyway, Thrym arrives from the Shetlands and he's miserable because there's nothing there. All there is these little ponies. There's no farmers left. And basically, he's getting nipped at his heels by these horrible, vicious little creatures. So he's like, I'm done with this. I'm out of here. And he marches on back into the waters, wading. I'm going to find you. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. Until he sees another island. And it's the Orkney Islands. And Thrym steps foot on the Orkneys and he is delighted. There's farmers, there's people all over, and he's biting their heads off, spitting them away, sucking out the slimy animal and throwing away the flappy skin suits, covering the island in flappy skin suits. But as he's doing this, he's watching the horizon and he's looking at this procession of boats sailing away from the island. All these people fleeing this giant. The problem is, they've now just told Thrym which way they're going. So once his belly is full, he's off after them, wading into the water, roaring and bellowing, I'm going to find you. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. And after a few days, Thrym sees land and steps foot on the Highlands of Scotland. And he looks around that desolate land and, well, he's a wee bit disappointed because all there is like fluffy clouds roaming about the place. And, you know, who wants to eat a cloud? And he's looking and wondering where all the people were, but he sees this path leading away where all the footfall has worn a path in the earth. And Thrym starts to follow. Now, Thrym doesn't know this yet, but he's actually heading west. He's heading to a little village called Applecross. Now, for those that are not familiar with Scotland, Applecross is a tiny wee fishing village on the west coast, just across from the Isle of Skye. It's also a rather peculiar little place because it's still quite isolated. Excuse me. And there is only one road in and out, and being a twisted country that likes challenges, we didn't build a simple road. You see, Applecross is surrounded by hills and I want to say mountains, but now living in Canada, they just don't seem like mountains, but we'll say mountains. And of course, being the sort of race we are, we didn't build round to that. No. We built the road up and over. If you ever go camping in Applecross, enjoy that downward drive with your caravan behind you. It is a fun experience. But the people of Applecross at this time are a small fishing community and they are swamped. You see, people have been flooding into them for weeks, refugees escaping this giant, terrified, and the people of Applecross have had enough. There's no beds, they're running low on food. And a lot of them are like, no, we need to get rid of these people, send them to Skye, make them their problem. But the other side are like, but how can we do that? This giant is coming. We've got to do something. So eventually, sanity wins through, and they realise that they've got to try and stop this giant, because if we don't, he's just going to eat everyone. So now the people of Applecross sit and think long and hard until a plan is formed. Now, if you ever visit Applecross today, at the bottom of the mountain, there is a campsite. That campsite at this stage was empty. It was just a field. And because of its location, the people of Applecross thought this was the best place to set a trap. And what they did is they dug the biggest, deepest, giant-size hole you can imagine. Into that hole, they went round and cut down as many trees as they could and whittled their tips into spikes and placed them into the pit. Then they covered the top of the hole with grass and heather and anything they could find. And then finally, gathering all the rope they could, they twisted it into a massive tripwire and placed it in front of the whole. Well, the plan was set. They were ready to try and deal with the giant, and all they needed now was a giant. So they waited. And they waited. And they waited until about 7 days had passed. And they began to think maybe this giant wasn't coming. But all of a sudden, the ground started to tremble, and they looked up above the mountains and saw a huge, boulder-shaped head appear, the head of Thrym. He had arrived at Applecross, and he glowers down at the people of Applecross, smiling a big toothy grin. I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna catch you. I'm gonna eat you, as he starts to walk down the mountain towards the village. Well, it was time to lay the trap. They sent up half a dozen of their cheekiest, nastiest children. Because if you don't know anything about giants, they absolutely deplore bad manners. They do. They hate rudeness. So these young children, being experts in rudeness, were shouting certain things that, well, to be honest, I will not mention on this story, for they may be too offensive for delicate ears. Things to do with his nose and his posterior and other areas of his body, until Thrym was furious. He was enraged. He's roaring and bellowing, and now he decides these children are a snack. He starts to run down the mountain, chasing them, but they know the land. They disappear into the heather, but he's still running, roaring and bellowing. I'm going to find you. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to... And at that point, Thrym hits the tripwire and goes arse over elbow into the air and whack down into the pit. All the tree spikes impaling his body and pinning him to the earth. He's roaring and bellowing in agony, but the people of Applecross are ready. They are not going to miss this opportunity. Excuse me. They jump into that pit with axe and sword and knife and spoon and whatever else they can find. And they start to slice and chop and dice and chop and slice and chop and dice and chop and slice and chop and dice and chop and basically cut and cut and cut and dice and slice. And they keep going for 24 hours. They keep slicing and dicing and chopping away until eventually they all clamber out of the pit, covered head to toe in giant gore. And they look down into that pit and they all cheer, because what they see is what's left of Thrym. Tiny little cubes of giant meat. Roughly the size of OXO cubes, just to give you a reference. And they all cheer and celebrate and roar, and they decide to have a party. Because let's be honest, how many times you get to kill a giant? So they head down to the local pub, and it's a fine ceilidh. There's singing, there's dancing, there's song, there's regaling stories of how they would have single-handedly dealt with that giant. Sorry, my throat's getting a wee bit dry in this room, folks. I'm not dying, I promise. Well, after hours of partying and celebration, they realise they really should go to bed. I mean, they've all got to get up for the fishing in the morning. So they head off to their beds, they wash themselves, put on fresh PJs, they slip under their bed sheets, and just as their heads are about to touch the pillow, they hear it. It's a horrible sound. It's like the dentist drill amplified. It's like a washing machine that's unbalanced. It's like every vibrating, screaming noise you can imagine. And it says something they never thought they would hear again. I'm going to find you. I'm gonna catch you. I'm gonna eat you. And the whole village, as one, screams no. They charge down to that pit, and sure enough, at the bottom of that pit, all those tiny little cubes of giant meat are jiggling, wiggling, vibrating and bouncing about and making that hideous noise and saying those awful words. And the village can't believe it. How can he still be alive? How are we gonna kill him? And then someone shouts, burn him. He can't survive the fire. So they gather peat and oil and grass and flame, and they build up the biggest bonfire you have ever seen, and they set it ablaze, and they burn it for 7 days and 7 nights. And I'm not going to lie, there probably was hot dogs and s'mores, because this is Scotland and we really need any opportunity for a barbecue or bonfire. But basically, they burn it bright until eventually the flames start to come down and down and down. And when everything is extinguished, all that is left at the bottom of that fire is the finest ash. And the people of Applecross are so happy. They have just killed the giant. They cheer, they roar, they celebrate, and they decide, party? Because, you only get to kill a giant twice in your life. So they decide it's time to have another great party, and they turn and start to walk back to the village bar. But just as they do that, a wee breeze comes in across the ocean. It goes into the pit and whips up some of that ash and sends it into the heavens, where it whirls and burls about. And the people of Applecross watch it, and they smile, because, Mother Earth is going to clean up this mess. But as they watch, they happen to notice that that cloud of ash that's swirling and burling is staying still. And the observant amongst them are watching all the flags that are pretty much standing upright in strong breeze. And they realise that something is very, very wrong, particularly when that cloud of ash starts to slowly drift towards the people of Applecross. And then they hear it on the wind, the most horrible, buzzing, hideous noise in their ears. And then they hear those words they never thought they would hear. I'm going to find you. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. And the people of Applecross turn and run. They run for their very lives. Were you guys wanting a happy ending in this story? Because I should have probably warned you at the beginning that wasn't coming. Okay, sorry. Really should give those warnings not at the end of a tale, shouldn't I? What I'm going to say to you folks is I'd love to say this is a happy ending story. I'd love to say that this story ends with happily ever after and everyone being fine, but it doesn't. You see, the people of Applecross ran for their very lives, but running didn't matter. That cloud of ash chased them. That cloud of ash grew. It spread all over the Scottish Highlands. It spread all over Scotland, all over England. It spread into the continent. It spread all over the world. And if, like the people of Applecross, you ever visit the UK, because that's where the clouds are stronger. If you ever visit and you happen to be roaming about on a hot summer's night, and you happen to be enjoying yourself, and then you just notice out the corner of your eye what looks like a wee cloud of ash swirling and burling. My advice to you is this: run. Run for your very lives. Because if you don't, those midges are gonna get you. I should put a wee disclaimer on the end of this tale, because I'm now in Canada, that I had to adjust that to mosquitoes in Canada, because most people don't know what midges are. So I will just add finally this. If you aren't familiar with the midges, imagine a mosquito. It maybe comes one or two. Bzzz, drinks your blood, slap. No. Scotland is a vile, vicious, evil country that can only invent some of the most bizarre things. I want you to imagine smaller midges that travel in packs of millions. And they come and they bite and nip and they drink and they leave you covered in red, itchy spots that make you want to peel the very flesh off the bone. That is what Scotland has given to the world. That is the gift of Thrym. Thank you. Oh, guys, I want to thank you very much for joining. Lovely. Some of the Flagstaff Scottish Club up in Sedgwick. Lovely guys there. Thank you very much for joining me, folks. I hope this has been an enjoyable way to pass an afternoon. I am going to be trying to do these a bit more often, mainly for my sanity. It'll also force me to learn new stories again. It will keep me hopefully telling stories, although this is weird. I'm not going to lie. Not having you here and being able to read your body language to be able to adjust tone and tempo is very strange. So hopefully you have enjoyed these anyway. If you have enjoyed them, most of the people on here are friends, etc. But I will say, there is a PayPal link, etc., to leave tips. If not, I'm doing this basically to give something back anyway. So I'm more than happy just to have an audience that are enjoying, appreciative, and having fun and getting to be distracted for an hour or so during this bizarre period in the world's time. So thank you for joining, folks. It's been a pleasure. I'm Calum Lykan, as most of you know. Secret, now I'm not wearing a kilt. It's really funny. I'm actually wearing a pair of khaki camo shorts because I once tried to wear my kilt and do stories in here and nearly fainted. You guys just be grateful you can't see the state of me at the moment. It is warm in this little room, but thank you for joining. It's been a pleasure. Love yous all, and I will see yous all very soon, hopefully in the real world. If not, back here in the studio with me telling you some more stories. Have a lovely Sunday and try and eat properly. I don't want to hear of anyone sucking the innards out of a sausage or something, or a haggis. Try and eat it normally. Don't eat like Thrym. It's very bad manners at the table. Thanks for joining.